The crickets chirped in the humid summer night as Amara Daniels wiped the sweat off her brow. Her hands trembled slightly, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavily on her. In the corner of her cluttered home lab sat the prototype she had been working on tirelessly, a gleaming array of wires, circuits, and hope. The faint light from the single desk lamp illuminated the peeling wallpaper, a haunting reminder of the rundown house she inherited from her late grandmother. It was more than a home. It was her last connection to the woman who had taught her the value of resilience. Across the street, Ethan Blackwood's mansion stood like a monument to everything Amara lacked. The sprawling estate, with its manicured lawns and towering pillars, exuded wealth and power. Bright floodlights highlighted the pristine white walls, a sharp contrast to the crumbling edges of Amara's home. Tonight, the mansion buzzed with activity. Laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses drifted through the air. Ethan was hosting one of his infamous parties. Amara tried to ignore the noise, focusing instead on the calculations sprawled across her notebook. But the sound of mocking laughter pulled her gaze toward the window. Ethan was standing on his grand balcony, glass in hand, surrounded by guests in expensive suits and glittering gowns. His voice boomed, carrying easily over the quiet street. "Can you believe it?" Ethan said, gesturing toward Amara's home with a smirk. "Living in a shack like that, pretending she's going to change the world. It's pathetic, isn't it?" The crowd erupted in laughter, their faces contorted with disdain. Amara's stomach churned, but she forced herself to look away. This wasn't the first time Ethan had humiliated her, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. His words were barbed, designed to cut deep, and tonight, they hit their mark. As the laughter died down, Amara closed her notebook and stood, her legs shaky from sitting too long. She crossed the room to the window, her hand resting on the cracked windowsill. Her heart ached, but not with defeat, with determination. One day, she thought, they would see her worth. She would prove them wrong. The next morning, the remnants of Ethan's party lay scattered across his pristine lawn. Amara walked past on her way to the community library, where she often went to do research. She carried a tattered backpack stuffed with papers and tools, her chin held high despite the whispers of neighbors who had witnessed last night's spectacle. "Morning, Daniels," Ethan's voice called out. He was leaning against his sleek black sports car, a grin plastered across his face. "Off to invent another useless gadget? I'd offer you a ride. But," he gestured toward her backpack, "you don't exactly fit the luxury vibe." Amara paused, her fists clenched tightly around the straps of her backpack. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she replied evenly, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. Ethan's grin faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "You know, you could save yourself a lot of trouble. This whole genius inventor act? It's not going to take you anywhere. Maybe if you asked nicely, I'd hire you as a maid." Amara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She simply turned and continued walking, each step fueled by the fire Ethan had unwittingly stoked. She would never give him the satisfaction of breaking her spirit. As she reached the library, Amara felt a flicker of hope. She spent hours poring over technical manuals and sketching new designs, her mind a flurry of ideas. The prototype in her lab wasn't just a machine. It was her ticket to freedom, to proving that she was more than Ethan's insults, more than the color of her skin or the size of her bank account. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the library lights flickered off, Amara couldn't shake the weight of Ethan's words. They lingered in her mind like a dark shadow, a constant reminder of how far she still had to go. She walked home slowly, her backpack heavier than before. Passing Ethan's mansion, she saw him sitting on the balcony again, his face lit by the soft glow of a cigar. He didn't acknowledge her this time, but she felt his presence like a specter haunting her every step. Back in her lab, Amara lit the desk lamp and stared at her prototype. "One day," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears welling in her eyes. "One day, I'll show them all." Outside, Ethan's mansion glowed brightly against the darkened neighborhood, but Amara didn't look. She didn't need to. Her gaze was fixed firmly on the future. The morning sunlight seeped through the cracks in Amara's curtains, casting uneven patterns on the walls of her modest home. She sat at her workbench, her fingers carefully adjusting the delicate wires of her prototype. The small device, no bigger than a shoebox, was her greatest achievement, a renewable energy generator capable of powering homes without reliance on traditional grids. It was her dream encapsulated in metal and circuits, the culmination of years of learning, trial, and error. But the weight of the world bore down on her. Bills piled on the counter, mocking her with their red ink and final notices. The property tax deadline loomed closer, and the meager savings from her part-time tutoring job weren't enough to cover the costs. Every day felt like a race against time, and every night she fell asleep with the fear that she wouldn't make it. As Amara scribbled notes into her tattered notebook, a loud knock rattled her front door. Her heart jumped, and she hurried to answer, expecting the postman or a neighbor. Instead, she found herself face to face with two men in dark suits, city inspectors. "Ms. Daniels," one of them asked, glancing at a clipboard. "Yes, that's me," Amara said cautiously. "We received a complaint about zoning violations on your property. We need to take a look inside," the man said, his tone clipped and impersonal. Amara froze. "Zoning violations? There must be some mistake." "This will only take a moment," the second man interrupted, stepping forward as though he had already been invited. As the inspectors entered her home, Amara's mind raced. She knew exactly where this was coming from. Ethan Blackwood had been meddling again, using his influence to disrupt her progress. He'd done it before, having the city tow her car when she parked too close to his estate and complaining about the noise from her generator tests, even though she worked late at night to avoid disturbing the neighborhood. Scribbling something on his clipboard as he eyed her lab equipment. "This could be a safety hazard," the second chimed in. Amara's stomach churned. "This is my private property. Everything here is within code. We'll need to file a formal review," the first inspector said, cutting her off. "Expect a follow-up visit." The men left as abruptly as they had arrived, leaving Amara standing in the doorway, her hands trembling. She could feel Ethan watching from across the street, his smug grin practically radiating through his window. She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, her mind swirling with anger and frustration. Hours later, as she sat back at her workbench, Amara tried to push the encounter out of her mind. But the weight of Ethan's interference hung heavy. How was she supposed to focus when every step forward felt like dragging a boulder uphill? Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. A notification from a startup funding platform blinked on the screen. It was a reminder about an upcoming event where inventors could pitch their ideas to investors. Amara hesitated. She had thought about attending before, but the idea of facing wealthy, skeptical investors felt daunting. Still, the event was only a week away, and it might be her last chance to save her home. With a deep breath, she clicked the link and registered. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Amara refined her prototype, triple-checked her calculations, and rehearsed her pitch until her voice grew hoarse. She knew this event wasn't just about funding, it was about proving herself. If she could get just one investor to believe in her vision, she might have a fighting chance. But Ethan wasn't done. As Amara carried her prototype to her car one evening, she noticed him standing at the edge of his driveway, watching her with a smirk. "Going somewhere important?" he called out, his tone mocking. Amara ignored him, but he stepped closer. "You know, Daniels, some people just don't have what it takes. You can struggle all you want, but you'll never be more than what you are, a nobody." Amara stopped and turned to face him, her voice trembling but firm. "One day, I'll be someone you can't ignore, Ethan, and you'll regret every word you've ever said to me." Ethan chuckled. "We'll see about that." As she drove away, her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. She didn't know how, but she vowed to make him eat his words. In her quiet, run-down lab, she worked late into the night, fine-tuning her invention until her eyes burned with exhaustion. She wasn't just building a device. She was building her escape, her redemption, and her future. But as she stared at the glowing circuits of her prototype, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't finished with her yet. Amara sat at her small dining table, its surface cluttered with sketches and notes. The faint hum of her prototype filled the air, a comforting reminder of the progress she'd made. The upcoming investor pitch felt like a lifeline. With every passing hour, her anxiety grew, but so did her determination. She couldn't let Ethan, or the countless other voices that doubted her, win. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from the event organizer. Pitch confirmed. Arrive by 8 a.m. Good luck. She exhaled deeply, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. She spent the rest of the day rehearsing. Standing in front of the mirror, she repeated her pitch over and over, her words gaining confidence with each iteration. My name is Amara Daniels, and I'm here to revolutionize the energy industry, she began, her reflection staring back with growing resolve. But as night fell, doubt crept in. She sat in her lab, staring at the prototype that had consumed her life. Would it be enough? Could she truly convince someone to believe in her? She shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. She didn't have time for self-pity. The next morning, Amara loaded the prototype into her car. She had barely slept, but adrenaline kept her sharp. She wore her best outfit, a modest blazer and slacks, and hoped it was enough to make her look professional. As she backed out of her driveway, she saw Ethan standing on his balcony, sipping coffee and smirking. "Big day, Daniels," he called out, his tone dripping with condescension. Amara didn't reply. She couldn't let him rattle her now. The drive to the event venue felt like an eternity. When she arrived, she was greeted by a sleek conference hall buzzing with activity. Innovators from across the city had gathered, their polished presentations and advanced prototypes making Amara feel out of place. She clutched her device tightly, drawing strength from the knowledge that her invention was special. One by one, the presenters took the stage, pitching ideas ranging from artificial intelligence systems to luxury eco-products. The judges, an intimidating panel of investors, asked sharp questions, their expressions giving nothing away. Amara watched and waited, her heart pounding louder with each passing minute. Finally, her name was called. She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. Taking a deep breath, she began her pitch. My name is Amara Daniels, and I'm here to revolutionize how we think about energy. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the podium tightly. This device, she held up her prototype, is a renewable energy generator that can provide affordable, sustainable power to communities worldwide. It's compact, efficient, and, most importantly, accessible to those who need it most. The judges leaned forward, intrigued. Amara continued, explaining the science behind her invention and the potential impact it could have. For a moment, she forgot about the pressure and simply spoke from the heart. She ended with a firm, "This is more than an invention, it's a solution. A way to make energy equitable and sustainable for everyone." The room was silent for a moment before polite applause broke out. The judges began their questions, each one testing Amara's knowledge and confidence. She answered as best as she could, her voice faltering only once. When the session ended, she stepped off the stage, her legs shaking. A small part of her dared to hope. As she packed up her prototype, she noticed one of the judges, a woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile, lingering near the stage. Amara's heart leaped. Maybe, just maybe, she had impressed someone. But hope has a way of attracting trouble. As Amara returned to her car, she noticed something off. The trunk, where she had stored her prototype, was slightly ajar. Her breath hitched as she opened it fully. Her device was there, but the wiring had been tampered with, the circuits dislodged. Panic rose in her chest as she realized someone had sabotaged her work. She scanned the parking lot, her eyes darting for any sign of the culprit. In the distance, a familiar figure leaned casually against a car. Ethan. He met her gaze with a slow, mocking wave before driving away. Amara's hands trembled as she inspected the damage. Her carefully calibrated invention was now unusable. The investor who had shown interest would want a demonstration soon, but in its current state, the prototype wouldn't work. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This was a setback, not the end. Gritting her teeth, she loaded the broken device into the car and drove home. She spent the rest of the day in her lab, disassembling and rebuilding. her anger fueling her determination. Ethan might have tried to sabotage her, but she wasn't going to let him win. As midnight approached, Amara leaned back in her chair, her hands stained with grease and her body aching. The prototype was still far from ready, but she had made progress. She stared at the flickering light on her device, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You can knock me down," she whispered, "but I'll get back up every time." Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, but Amara knew Ethan was watching. She didn't care. Her focus was sharper than ever, her resolve unbreakable. The buzz of Amara's phone jolted her awake. She had fallen asleep at her workbench, her head resting against her prototype, blinking against the harsh morning light streaming through the window. She reached for her phone. It was a notification from the event organizer. A follow-up investor meeting had been scheduled for later that week. Relief and panic hit her simultaneously. This was her second chance, a rare opportunity to secure funding, but her prototype was still in shambles. Ethan's sabotage had damaged several critical components, and she'd spent the better part of the night trying to reverse the damage. The clock was ticking. Determined, Amara pulled herself together, grabbing her tools and diving back into the repair work. Hours passed as she carefully rewired circuits and calibrated the energy cells. She worked with singular focus, fueled by a mix of anger and desperation. Each adjustment brought her closer to restoring the device, but her progress was slow. By late afternoon, she managed to get the prototype operational. The light flickered on, signaling that the energy transfer system was working again. She let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling from exhaustion. "One step closer," she whispered to herself, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't finished with her. That evening, as Amara went over her notes, she noticed a folder sitting at the edge of her desk. It was where she kept the blueprints for her invention, detailed schematics that outlined every piece of her groundbreaking design. Her stomach dropped when she flipped through the pages. Several were missing. She frantically searched the lab, turning over stacks of papers and rummaging through drawers. The missing pages weren't anywhere. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the last few days. The tampered prototype, the smirk on Ethan's face as he waved to her in the parking lot. Her blood ran cold as the realization hit her. Ethan hadn't just sabotaged her work, he'd stolen it. Heart pounding, she logged into her computer and searched for recent patents filed in the energy sector. It didn't take long to find it. There, under Ethan Blackwood's name, was a patent for a device remarkably similar to her own. A renewable energy generator with the same core principles she had spent years developing. Amara's vision blurred with rage. He had stolen her invention, her dream, and claimed it as his own. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen, her mind teetering between despair and fury. Ethan had not only tried to ruin her chances of success, but now he was poised to profit off her work. She slammed her laptop shut and paced the room. What could she do? She didn't have the resources to fight him in court, and any investor she approached would see Ethan's name on the patent and assume she was the one trying to steal. That night, Amara sat in her lab, her thoughts a whirlwind of anger, fear, and determination. Ethan had taken everything from her, her dignity, her work, her chance at success, but he hadn't taken her resolve. "If he thinks I'm giving up, he's wrong," she muttered under her breath. The next morning, Amara began devising a plan. She didn't just want to expose Ethan. She wanted to ensure he could never undermine her or anyone else again. She began making modifications to her prototype, adding new features that weren't in the original design. If she could improve the device enough to make Ethan's stolen blueprint obsolete, she might still have a chance to secure investors. But it wasn't just about the invention anymore. It was about proving that she was more than the sum of Ethan's insults and betrayals. A week later, Amara sat across from an investor in a sleek downtown office. The woman, an influential figure in the tech world, listened intently as Amara described her invention. "This is impressive," the investor said, her sharp eyes scanning the new schematics Amara had brought. "But I see a patent on file for something similar. Ethan Blackwood's name is on it." Amara's stomach tightened. "That's because he stole my design," she said firmly. "What I'm presenting to you now is the real deal, a more advanced, efficient version of the original. If you invest in me, I'll prove that this technology isn't just viable, it's revolutionary. The investor leaned back in her chair, studying Amara. After a long pause, she said, "You've got guts, Miss Daniels. I'll think about it." Amara left the office feeling both hopeful and wary. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. She knew she had to keep pushing forward, even as Ethan's shadow loomed over her progress. That evening, she received an email from the investor, a request for a live demonstration of her prototype. It was the break she had been waiting for, but as she stared at the email, she couldn't ignore the gnawing fear in her gut. Ethan wouldn't let her win without a fight, and this time, she needed to be ready for whatever he threw her way. Amara sat at her workbench, her prototype glowing faintly under the warm light of her desk lamp. Her fingers hovered over the tiny tools she had been using to fine-tune the device, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The request for a live demonstration from the investor gave her hope, but also fear. Ethan's name on the stolen patent loomed like a dark cloud over her head. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Opening her laptop, Amara began digging deeper into Ethan's patent filing. She examined every detail, her stomach churning with anger as she recognized not only her invention's principles, but even her exact phrasing in the technical descriptions. He hadn't just stolen her idea, he had copied her work word for word. Her jaw clenched as she scrolled further. Buried in the legal documentation, she found something even more damning. A timestamp that predated the night her blueprints went missing. Ethan must have taken them well before the sabotage at the investor pitch, likely using his assistant to spy on her lab during one of his inspections. She slammed the laptop shut and leaned back, her hands trembling. Ethan's arrogance was staggering, but his greed was his weakness. He couldn't resist taking credit for her brilliance, even if it meant leaving behind clues to his theft. Amara knew she couldn't let him get away with it. But what could she do? A legal battle wasn't an option. She didn't have the money to hire lawyers, and any attempt to publicly accuse Ethan without hard proof could backfire, ruining her reputation further. As the night stretched on, an idea began to form in her mind. If she couldn't fight Ethan in the courts, she would outsmart him in the public eye. She would rebuild her invention, not just to prove it worked, but to make it so groundbreaking that no one could doubt who the true genius was. She needed help. The next morning, Amara reached out to a few contacts she had met at previous tech conventions, hoping someone would believe in her enough to provide guidance. Most of her emails went unanswered, but one reply stood out, from Samantha Vega, a high-profile tech mogul who had long been a vocal supporter of underrepresented innovators. "Amara, I've heard about your work. If you're willing to take a risk, I'd like to help. Let's meet," the email read. Amara's heart raced. Samantha Vega's name carried weight in the industry, and if she believed in Amara, it could change everything. 2 days later, Amara found herself sitting across from Samantha in a sleek, minimalist office. Samantha exuded confidence, her sharp gaze unwavering as Amara explained her situation. She described Ethan's sabotage, the stolen patent, and her struggles to rebuild. When Amara finished, Samantha leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Ethan Blackwood is a powerful man, but his reputation is built on exploitation and opportunism. If what you're saying is true, we can turn this around. But you'll need to play smart." Amara nodded. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes." "Good," Samantha said. "Here's what we'll do. First, you'll refine your prototype into something Ethan's stolen version can't compete with. Then, we'll go public, investors, media, everyone. We'll make so much noise that Ethan won't have a chance to recover." A flicker of hope ignited in Amara's chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt like the odds weren't entirely stacked against her. Over the next week, with Samantha's mentorship and resources, Amara threw herself into perfecting her invention. She worked day and night, adding new features that enhanced efficiency and usability. She integrated a modular system that allowed users to adapt the generator for various needs, something Ethan's stolen blueprint couldn't replicate. But as the live demonstration approached, the pressure mounted. Samantha's connections had secured media coverage and invited influential investors, but the stakes were higher than ever. If her prototype failed, It wouldn't just be a setback, it would be the end of her career. 2 days before the event, Amara received an unexpected visitor, Ethan. He strolled into her driveway as if he owned the place, his smug grin firmly in place. "Daniels," he said, leaning casually against her fence. "I hear you've been busy. Word gets around, you know." Amara crossed her arms, glaring at him. "What do you want?" "Ethan?" He shrugged. "Just a friendly reminder. You don't belong in this world. No one's going to believe a nobody like you over someone like me. Why not save yourself the embarrassment and quit while you're ahead?" Amara felt her blood boil, but she refused to let him see her anger. Instead, she stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. "You're afraid," she said quietly. "That's why you keep showing up here, why you stole my work. You know you can't beat me, Ethan. And when I prove it, the whole world will see who you really are." Ethan's smirk faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly. "We'll see about that," he said before walking away. As he disappeared down the street, Amara turned back to her lab, her resolve stronger than ever. She wasn't just fighting for her invention anymore. She was fighting for her future, her dignity, and the truth. The live demonstration was just days away, and she was ready to show the world what she was capable of. The days leading up to the live demonstration blurred together as Amara worked tirelessly in her lab. The hum of her tools and the soft glow of the prototype became her constant companions. Samantha's resources had given her access to materials she could have only dreamed of before, and for the first time, she felt her invention truly coming to life. The modified prototype now housed a sleek, modular design. It was no longer just a compact energy generator. It was adaptable, scalable, and smarter than anything Ethan could have imagined. Every wire she connected and every calculation she double-checked felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that Ethan had tried to steal. Samantha visited her lab often, offering advice and encouragement. One evening, she stood by as Amara tested the new feature, a dynamic energy output system that allowed the device to adjust its power based on the needs of the user. The prototype hummed steadily, its glowing interface a testament to Amara's brilliance. "You've outdone yourself, Amara," Samantha said, her tone both proud and impressed. "This is going to blow the investors away." Amara smiled faintly, her exhaustion evident in the dark circles under her eyes. "It has to. I don't have any other options." Samantha placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've already won by getting this far. Now, it's about making them see what you've always known. You're a force to be reckoned with." The night before the demonstration, Amara finally allowed herself a moment of rest. As she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with what-ifs. What if the prototype malfunctioned? What if Ethan showed up to derail her again? But her thoughts shifted to her grandmother, her unwavering faith, her quiet strength. Amara could almost hear her voice, calm and steady. "You are stronger than the doubts they cast on you. You are destined for greatness." The next morning, the demonstration venue buzzed with energy. Investors, tech reporters, and industry leaders milled about the room, chatting excitedly as they awaited the presentations. Samantha had pulled strings to ensure that the media was there, cameras ready to document Amara's moment. Amara stood backstage, cradling the prototype in her hands. She adjusted her blazer, her palms sweaty despite the cool air. Samantha appeared at her side, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Remember," Samantha said, her voice low and steady, "this is your moment. No one can take it from you." Amara nodded, taking a deep breath as her name was called. She stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. The bright lights felt like a spotlight on her insecurities, but she forced herself to focus. She set the prototype on the podium and faced the audience. "My name is Amara Daniels," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I'm here to introduce a revolutionary energy solution that has the potential to change lives." She explained the features of the prototype, her confidence growing with each word. The audience leaned in, their interest piqued as she demonstrated the modular system. She adjusted the energy output in real time, showing how the device could power anything from a single home to an entire community. Gasps of amazement rippled through the crowd as the glowing interface displayed its adaptability. Amara's hands moved deftly, her expertise evident as she walked the audience through each capability. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Amara blinked, momentarily stunned by the response. She stepped back, letting the audience's energy wash over her. But as she turned to leave the stage, she spotted a figure in the back of the room, Ethan. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Samantha noticed him too. "Ignore him," she whispered as they walked off stage. "He's losing, and he knows it." Backstage, Amara's phone buzzed with a flood of notifications. Articles were already being published, praising her invention and calling it a game-changer. Investors approached her with business cards and eager smiles, each one offering to fund her next steps. But Ethan wasn't done. As Amara packed up her prototype, Samantha approached with a grave expression. "I just got word from one of the reporters," she said. "Ethan's trying to spin this. He's claiming you stole his designs." Amara's stomach churned. How could anyone believe him? "I just proved." "It doesn't matter what's true," Samantha interrupted. "He's powerful, and he's desperate. He'll do anything to discredit you." Amara clenched her fists, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. "Then we show them the truth. Let him dig his hole deeper. I'll bury him with facts." Samantha smiled faintly. "That's the spirit. But we'll need to move fast." That night, Amara worked with Samantha's team to prepare a press release, detailing the theft of her designs and presenting evidence of her work predating Ethan's patent. They planned to release it alongside interviews with reporters who had seen her live demonstration. The next step wasn't just about proving her invention. It was about exposing Ethan for what he truly was. The day of the public demonstration arrived with an electric energy in the air. The venue, a grand conference center downtown, was packed with investors, reporters, and tech enthusiasts. Amara sat backstage, her nerves threatening to unravel her confidence. The hum of conversations filtered through the curtain, reminding her of the magnitude of this moment. Samantha stood beside her, calm and collected, a steadying presence in the chaos. "You're ready," she said, placing a reassuring hand on Amara's shoulder. "You've done the work. Now, show them who you are." Amara nodded, gripping the prototype tightly in her hands. The modifications she had made were bold, features that even Ethan's stolen blueprints couldn't match. But the shadow of his interference lingered in her mind. She pushed the thought aside as her name was announced. Walking onto the stage, Amara was greeted by a sea of expectant faces and the bright glare of camera lights. She set the prototype on the podium and took a steadying breath. "My name is Amara Daniels," she began, her voice ringing clear despite the pounding of her heart. "What you see before you is more than an invention. It's a vision for the future, a future where sustainable energy is accessible to everyone, everywhere." The audience leaned in as she began her demonstration. Amara explained the core principles of her device, seamlessly blending scientific detail with a compelling narrative about its potential to change lives. She activated the prototype, and the room was bathed in a soft, steady glow as it powered a series of devices, a laptop, a small heater, and a set of LED lights. But it was the next part of the demonstration that truly stunned the crowd. Amara adjusted the settings, showcasing the modular system that allowed the prototype to scale its output in real time. With a few clicks, the device powered a small generator, simulating how it could supply energy to an entire building. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of astonishment. The reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, and the cameras zoomed in on the glowing interface of the device. Amara's heart swelled as she saw their reactions. "What you're witnessing," she said, her voice steady, "is the future of energy, efficient, adaptable, and within reach of those who need it most." The applause was deafening. Amara stepped back, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. But as she prepared to leave the stage, a voice interrupted the applause. "Impressive performance, Ms. Daniels," the voice drawled. Amara froze. Ethan Blackwood stepped into the spotlight. A smug grin plastered across his face. He was dressed impeccably, exuding confidence as he addressed the crowd. But I have to wonder, he continued, how much of this innovation is really hers? The room fell silent. Amara's breath caught in her throat as Ethan pulled out a document, a copy of the patent he had stolen. He turned to the audience, gesturing grandly. I hate to disrupt such a riveting display, but I think it's only fair to inform you that this so-called invention is based on technology that I patented weeks ago. A murmur spread through the crowd. Reporters began whispering to one another, their pens poised to capture the unfolding drama. Amara's fists clenched at her sides, but Samantha's words rang in her ears. This is your moment. No one can take it from you. Amara stepped forward, her voice firm. You're right, Mr. Blackwood. The technology you patented does bear a striking resemblance to my invention. Because you stole it. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Ethan's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. Bold accusation, he said, feigning indignation. Where's your proof? Amara turned to the audience, her voice calm and clear. Right here. She gestured to a large screen behind her, where Samantha had prepared a slideshow. It displayed dated photos and videos of Amara working on her prototype months before Ethan's patent filing. The room erupted into whispers as each image and video played, showing Amara's meticulous development process. One clip even captured her presenting an early version of the prototype at a local tech fair, complete with a timestamp that predated Ethan's so-called patent. Ethan's face reddened, and he opened his mouth to retort, but Amara wasn't finished. And here's what makes my invention different from anything Ethan has stolen, she continued, activating the prototype's newest feature. The device displayed a real-time energy-sharing interface, allowing multiple devices to connect and redistribute power efficiently, a capability that wasn't in Ethan's stolen design. The crowd erupted into applause, louder and more fervent than before. Reporters crowded forward, shouting questions at Ethan, whose confident facade had crumbled. Amara stepped back, letting the proof and the audience's reaction speak for itself. Samantha joined her, a triumphant smile on her face. Well done, she whispered, as Amara left the stage. Her heart was lighter than it had been in years. She had faced Ethan's sabotage, exposed his lies, and proved her worth on her own terms. But she knew this wasn't the end. Ethan wouldn't go down quietly, and she was ready for the fight ahead. The demonstration's fallout was immediate and explosive. Within hours of Amara's presentation, news outlets began circulating articles about her invention and the dramatic confrontation with Ethan. Headlines ranged from "The Energy Revolution," Amara Daniels' breakthrough, to "Millionaire Blackwood accused of theft." Amara sat in Samantha's office, scrolling through the flood of notifications on her phone. Comments poured in, with strangers rallying behind her. Finally, someone calling out these corporate thieves. And Ethan Blackwood is finished. Amara is the future. The support was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the battle still ahead. They're watching Amara, Samantha said, pacing in front of her desk. Investors, media, regulators. Ethan's empire is cracking, but he's not out yet. Amara nodded, setting her phone down. He'll fight back. He always does. The door opened, and Samantha's assistant walked in with a tablet. You need to see this, she said, handing it over. On the screen was a breaking news segment. Ethan stood before a cluster of microphones, his expression carefully neutral as he addressed the media. These baseless accusations are an attack on my reputation, Ethan said smoothly. I've spent years supporting innovation and progress. Amara Daniels' claims are desperate attempts to discredit my legitimate work. Amara clenched her fists as Ethan's lies spilled into the airwaves. He gestured to his legal team standing behind him. My attorneys are already taking action, he continued. The truth will come out, and when it does, I'm confident my integrity will remain intact. Samantha lowered the tablet with a grim look. He's doubling down, as expected. Amara felt the familiar churn of anger and frustration, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. Let him talk, she said quietly. We've got the truth on our side. The next step was crucial, turning public perception firmly in Amara's favor. With Samantha's guidance, Amara recorded a heartfelt interview that aired on a major news channel. Sitting in her lab, Surrounded by sketches and prototypes, she spoke directly to the camera. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about every innovator who's been silenced or stolen from because they didn't have the resources to fight back. My invention is proof that brilliance can come from anywhere, even from someone like me, working in a tiny lab with nothing but a dream and determination." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "I won't let lies or power take away what I've worked so hard to create. And I hope this fight inspires others to do the same." The response was immediate. Social media lit up with hashtags like #StandWithAmara and #JusticeForInnovation. Investors who had previously hesitated now reached out, eager to align themselves with her growing momentum. But the most devastating blow to Ethan came not from public opinion, but from his own arrogance. A whistleblower within his company leaked emails that revealed Ethan's direct involvement in stealing Amara's blueprints. The emails detailed how he'd sent an assistant to infiltrate her lab and how he planned to discredit her if she ever came forward. The emails spread like wildfire, picked up by every major outlet. Ethan's name became synonymous with corruption and greed. Within days, his company's stock plummeted and key investors pulled out. Amara watched the news unfold from her lab, her emotions a mix of relief and vindication. Ethan had underestimated her, and now he was paying the price. A week later, Amara stood outside a courthouse, reporters crowding around her as she prepared to file a lawsuit against Ethan for patent theft. Samantha stood beside her, a steadying presence as Amara addressed the crowd. "This isn't just a personal fight," Amara said firmly. "It's about protecting innovation and ensuring that no one, no matter how powerful, can take advantage of those who work tirelessly to create something meaningful." Ethan didn't show up at the courthouse that day. His legal team was already scrambling to handle the avalanche of lawsuits and investigations triggered by the leaked emails. Back at Samantha's office, Amara sat down with a group of investors who had been impressed by her resilience and vision. They offered her more than funding. They wanted to partner with her to scale her invention globally. For the first time in months, Amara allowed herself to breathe deeply. The fight wasn't over, but she had won this battle. That night, as she walked back into her lab, she paused to take in the space that had been her sanctuary and her battleground. The prototype sat on her desk, a glowing reminder of everything she had overcome. Amara ran her fingers along its smooth surface, a small smile forming on her lips. This was just the beginning. The quiet hum of her prototype greeted Amara as she entered her lab late that evening. It felt surreal. Just weeks ago, she had been on the verge of losing everything. Now, she stood on the brink of global recognition. Offers poured in from investors, governments, and environmental organizations, all eager to fund and distribute her technology. The very invention Ethan had tried to steal was now poised to become the cornerstone of a sustainable energy revolution. But the journey wasn't over. Samantha entered the room, her usual sharp presence softened by a smile. "The board meeting is set for next week. They're ready to move forward with production as soon as the contracts are finalized." Amara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's happening so fast." "It is," Samantha agreed, leaning against the doorway. "But you earned this, Amara. You fought for it when no one else believed in you." Amara sighed, the weight of everything settling on her shoulders. "It's not just about the invention anymore," she said. "It's about what comes next. How do I use this to make real change? Not just for me, but for others like me?" Samantha's gaze softened. "That's the right question, and I think you already know the answer." Amara did. She had spent countless nights reflecting on her grandmother's words, her own struggles, and the systemic barriers that innovators like her faced. She wasn't just fighting for her invention anymore. She was fighting to create a future where others wouldn't have to go through what she had. The next morning, Amara announced the creation of the Daniels Innovation Foundation. The foundation's mission was simple but powerful: to support underrepresented inventors, providing them with resources, mentorship, and protection against exploitation. The announcement garnered as much attention as her invention itself. The same media outlets that had once doubted her now praised her vision and resilience. Investors flocked to support the initiative, eager to align themselves with her growing influence. But not everyone was celebrating. Ethan Blackwood, now disgraced and bankrupt, watched from the shadows as Amara's success soared. His legal team had abandoned him, his assets were frozen, and his name had become a cautionary tale in the corporate world. For the first time in his life, Ethan was powerless. Desperate, he showed up uninvited at one of Amara's public events. As she stepped off the stage after delivering a speech about her foundation, Ethan approached her, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by desperation. "Amara," he called out, his voice hoarse. She turned, her expression unreadable as she faced him. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his face haggard. He looked like a man who had lost everything. "I made mistakes," he began, his tone pleading. "I let my ego get the best of me. I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Amara studied him for a long moment. The crowd around them fell silent, watching the exchange. "Make things right," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't just hurt me, Ethan. You tried to erase me. You stole my work, my future, and my name." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "I know, and I'm sorry. I don't have anything left." Amara raised a hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to make this about you. This isn't a redemption arc for you, Ethan. This is about accountability. And I owe you nothing." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, the weight of his actions finally crushing him. That evening, Amara returned to her grandmother's grave for the first time in years. The cemetery was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of fresh rain. She knelt before the simple headstone, her heart full. "I did it, Grandma," she whispered, placing a small replica of her prototype beside the grave. "Everything you taught me, about strength, resilience, and never giving up, it's all here. And I promise I'll keep fighting, not just for me, but for everyone who needs a voice." As she stood, the clouds parted, and the moonlight illuminated the headstone. Amara smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her journey wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Amara's office buzzed with activity. Engineers, investors, and foundation staff moved in and out, discussing logistics for the next phase of production. The Daniels Innovation Foundation had grown rapidly, with teams working to deploy her renewable energy generators to underserved communities around the world. Sitting at her desk, Amara signed off on the final blueprint for mass production. The device, now officially named the Phoenix Generator, symbolized her rise from the ashes of adversity. As she set down her pen, a soft knock at the door pulled her attention. Samantha stepped in, holding a folder and wearing a small, satisfied smile. "The first production run is complete. We'll be shipping units by the end of the month." Amara nodded, the weight of the achievement settling over her. "It's really happening." "It is," Samantha said. "And the board just approved the next expansion phase for the foundation. This is only the beginning." As Samantha left, Amara leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting to the photo on her desk. It was of her grandmother, her kind eyes and warm smile forever etched in Amara's memory. She smiled softly. But the world hadn't forgotten about Ethan Blackwood. His downfall had become a cautionary tale in both business and legal circles. Once the golden boy of the corporate elite, Ethan was now shunned by his peers. Lawsuits, bankruptcy, and public disgrace had left him a shell of his former self. One evening, Amara passed by his estate, or what was left of it. The grand gates were rusted, and the lawn was overgrown with weeds. The once pristine mansion stood eerily quiet, a testament to the fragility of unchecked arrogance. She slowed her car, curiosity pulling her to a stop. In the dim light, she spotted a figure sitting on the steps of the mansion. Ethan. His suit was frayed, his posture slouched. For a moment, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Amara rolled down her window, debating whether to speak. But then she remembered his words, his cruelty, and the countless nights she had spent rebuilding what he tried to destroy. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Instead, she drove away, leaving Ethan behind in the ruins of his empire. Weeks later, the Daniels Innovation Foundation hosted its largest event yet, a community unveiling of the Phoenix Generator. Amara stood on a stage in a packed auditorium, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. Behind her, A massive screen displayed the sleek design of the generator, now ready to power entire neighborhoods. As the lights dimmed, Amara addressed the audience. "Today is about more than technology," she began. "It's about resilience. It's about rising above doubt, fear, and injustice. This device represents what's possible when we believe in ourselves and refuse to let others define our worth." The crowd erupted in applause as the screen lit up, showing a live demonstration of the Phoenix generator powering a small village. The energy was palpable, a celebration of progress and hope. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Amara stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the cool breeze carried a sense of peace. Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from one of the Foundation's young inventors, thanking her for the mentorship program and sharing their latest project, a water purification system designed to work with the Phoenix generator. Amara's smile widened. Her journey had come full circle. She had not only reclaimed her dream, but also created a space where others could chase theirs without fear. As she gazed at the stars, her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "You are stronger than the doubts they cast on you. You are destined for greatness." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of those words fill her with pride and resolve. Amara Daniels had built more than an invention. She had built a legacy.